Welcome back. This is Jeff Hicks, curator of the Strange as It Seems archives and grandnephew of John Hicks, who created Strange as It Seems back in the late 1920s. For this week's episode, we're going to continue on from stories from this amazing folder that I came across in the archives entitled Women Miscellaneous. Last week, we covered the John Hicks era of featured women. And for this week, let's dive into the era of Ernest Hicks, his brother, who took over the comic strip in 1944 when John Hicks passed away. He ran it for about 4 years into 1948, and then it was followed by my grandma Elsie, who carried the comic strip forward from 1948 all the way through the 1960s. Let's dive in. And here's Gold Star Mother of World War I. Her son fought in World War I, but she makes dozens of khaki handkerchiefs and presents them to soldiers. She has 3 sons eligible for service, 2 grandsons who've enlisted, and 3 more soon to be called. And here's a lovely card from Alma Gutterson with a photo of her on the front. Apparently this came from her niece. It said, "Dearest Helen, God bless us. My way to pray for this happy, joyous, holy day. God bless you in every way with love, work, and with song and play. Sincerely, Aunt Alma." So her niece had sent in the story of Alma Patterson from Pasadena, California. And it was basically an effort to aid men in service. And it was in memory of her son, who had lost his life as flyer in World War I. And according to Mrs. Gutterson, she says, "I'm making them out of khaki," she said, "because of the protective coloring. In foxholes and facing the enemy, white handkerchiefs would be too conspicuous." And here's an extraordinary woman featured initially by John Hicks, again by his brother Ernest in 1949 after she passed away. But Mrs. Janet Roper, amazing, also known as Mother Roper. She served 54 years locating missing seamen, men lost at sea, the Missing Seamen's Bureau. She founded it in 1920, and it had located over 9,000 men that were lost at sea. Extraordinary. This is just absolutely chock full of amazing things here in the proof. Not only do we have 3 looks like episodes of The Lookout, which was the newsletter from the Seamen's Church Institute of New York, one from 1943, actually the first one in 1939, actually the first one in 1936, going back to 1936. And I love this too, several Western Union telegrams back and forth about her appearance, setting up her appearance, Mrs. Roper. She appeared on the Columbia and National Network, looks like in 1938 and 39 on a couple of radio shows, but amazing woman. Mother Roper locating thousands of missing men at sea. Strange as it seems. How do you know Google is a woman? Well, because it won't let you finish a sentence without making a recommendation. And I always seem to find some really poignant stories in these folders, and this one really struck me. This was one of the later stories that John Hicks featured in his era about Willimore T. Jones. And this is actually sent by her. A photograph of Willimore here. She's an insurance agent. Her apparently just tragic life. Although she finds, apparently over and over again, thousands of 4-leaf clovers, her life has been literally a just series of calamitous misfortune. In fact, her neighbors called her Calamity Jane. She was trained for a singer. She lost her voice. She was a victim of the only robbery in her town for 25 years. She was in 5 auto accidents, lost 3 husbands, they all died, dropped her money in the cotton market, etc., and even a letter from Calamity Jane, Miss Willimore Jones, from 1941, and she says, "I'm writing to verify the statements in your letter. My life has been made up of misfortunes, and now at the age of 45, they continue, but to such a degree that I watch them to see the next one." How poignant is that? For instance, this month, the first in 20 years, when I could pay entirely out of debt, did I, not on your life. My blind 84-year-old mother fell and broke her hip. I was off on the first vacation I'd had in 18 years when it happened. She lives with me, so this tells you the misfortune. And just before I left, I found several four-leaf clovers. Once again, I could enumerate these instances on and on. I wrote a short skit once that I'm closing, and she did. She just wrote a skit that's in here that just goes on and on and on, just by the way she attracted bad luck. Again, I won't go on and on here, but certainly could. Extraordinarily misfortunate Miss Willimore Jones, known as Calamity Jane. And as she said, you asked for a small picture, and here is one enclosed. I don't understand what you propose to do, but wouldn't it be wonderful luck to come to Hollywood and be on one of your programs? And unfortunately, I don't see that she ever did appear on one, but my luck will be in the small left corner of an obscure paper in Shanghai. Anyway, here is what you asked for. Maybe my luck will change. It can't go on this way. Very truly, Willimore T. Jones. Moving on into the era of Ernest Hicks, who took over Strange as It Seems after John Hicks passed away. Strange as It Seems on D-Day had nothing to do with the war. He died of myocarditis. But you can always tell the Ernest Hicks era. Apparently, my grandfather, Ernest, was a bit of a rake, as they used to say in the 1940s. A womanizer, you get the picture. But you also get the picture when you look at the artwork from that era. And these are just great examples. We'll start off with the Crusade of Mad Girls. Apparently, during a crusade of the 11th century, thousands of maddened girls raced through the streets, and according to this comic strip, raced through the streets tearing their clothes off until they were stricken with convulsions. So, of course, he loved showing that. And I love here in the story, in the town of southern France during the 11th century, here's the background. The populace was treated with a startling sight. Here it is, thousands and thousands of girls, actually naked to start with, as they say here, but for our family readership, we better treat it as above. Rushed through the streets wildly in a concerted effort, apparently, to form a crusade against the fanatic sect known as the Albigenses. Most or all of the women were stricken dumb and finally fell in convulsions of ecstasy. It's one of the strangest phenomenons in history. And another one from the Ernest Hicks era, which you can tell by a man tearing the clothes off of a woman, but really the sad and tragic story of witchery. This is just 1 year in 1515. In that year alone, 500 Swiss women were burned as witches in 2 months. 600 women were burned in one German town. And during that same year, one judge alone condemned over 15,000 witches. The year 1515. And continuing on with the sexy Ernest Hicks era imagery, the ghost girl of Torres, Strait. Really interesting story here. Barbara Thompson, shipwrecked, apparently along with her husband. Don't know what happened to him, but she was held by primitive natives for 2 years and was forced to marry one of them because the chief thought she was the ghost of his sister. They'd never seen white women before. The ghost girl of Torres Strait. You know, my girlfriend just stopped and said, "You weren't even listening to me." And I thought, that's a weird way to start a conversation. And another tragic woman featured in the era of Ernest Hicks, drawn by Dick Kirby, Francesca da Polenta. She was a tragic sweetheart betrothed to Giovanni Malatesta, who apparently at the time was the ugliest man in Italy. He not wisely, sent his handsome brother Paolo to woo her for him, kind of in her stead. The two fell desperately in love, and when Giovanni discovered this, he killed both her and her lover. Here's a beautiful painting by Jacombe Hood of the love of Paolo and Francesca, and a poem as it was featured by Dante. This tragic couple was featured not only by Dante, but by Boccaccio, and dozens of others have written of this story. Famous painters as this one featured them, and it's even thought that the idea of Romeo and Juliet by Shakespeare might have been inspired and based on this tragic couple. Paolo and Francesca. Strange as it seems. Well, they say love may be blind, but marriage is a real eye-opener, let me tell you. And a interesting story about a female pilot from 1946 in the Ernest Hicks era. Apparently in 1915, a sensation was caused over Los Angeles by a night sky writer using magnesium flares, and the pilot turned out to be 18-year-old Catherine Stinson. And moving on, another story of female pilots, and we're moving in now into the era of Elsie Hicks, who took over the comic strip. Strangely enough, we're talking about female pilots, but she took it over after Ernest Hicks, her husband and my grandfather, passed away on from a plane crash in 1948. But from the era of Elsie, we have Mrs. Nellie Rooser of Quakertown, Pennsylvania, who achieved her flying wings at the age of 64, and have a letter here, handwritten letter from Nellie Rooser, Flying Grandma Nellie, as she was known. And then a really old, extraordinarily old woman from history, apparently the Countess of Desmond, Catherine Fitzgerald. She lived to be 147 years old, but apparently even at 120 years old, she routed 2 assailants who came and tried to kill her. She walked each week to market of a distance of about 3-4 miles. Really extraordinary woman, the old Countess of Desmond. And here too, I have this really interesting mimeograph. I'm not really sure why it's in here, but it looks like tragedies for 800 years that pursued the Fitzgerald family. Amazing stories in here of executions, torture, ruin, exile, and unhappy love. Pretty amazing family here, the Fitzgerald family. And looking at a lot of the extraordinary women that Elsie Hicks featured in her era of the comic strip, as you might expect too, because in her own right, Elsie Hicks was an extraordinary woman. Not only did she run the comic strip from 1948, when her husband, my grandfather, Ernest Hicks, died in a plane crash, she ran it all the way through most of the 1960s, in fact, before she handed it over to my father, Ernest Hicks Jr., and his wife. But she was also by day an executive secretary. Strange as it seems, was never much of a moneymaker. It was really more of a labor of love. So she worked all day long as an executive secretary, and then at night would put these stories together, and then meet with the artists first thing in the morning, drop off the stories to them, and go to work. She did this for decades. And so I just, too, as I look through these stories, I often think, I wonder if these people are even remembered by their descendants anymore. They're just extraordinary people, and that's kind of one of the motivators for me, too, is to bring back some of these extraordinary stories of people that are long forgotten. And here's some amazing women forgotten in history. We have Rebecca Lukens, one of the first women in the United States engaged in the manufacture of iron products. She was so successful at it that boiler plates turned out from her mills were used in the construction of George Stephenson's early locomotives. Rebecca Lukens from 1825. We have the first U.S. woman ambassador, Eugenie Anderson, first woman to carry the title of ambassador from 1951. And another extraordinary woman, Lise Meitner, nuclear physicist, born in Vienna. Along with a colleague, they were both refugees from Germany working in Denmark. They were the first scientists to offer the theory of nuclear fission. A theory proved to be correct a few months later. This is back in 1939, and this comic strip, which was in 1955, at the time she was 77 years old and was still working in her laboratory at Sweden's Atomic Energy Commission. And here's a letter from the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission confirming the story of Lise Meitner. Extraordinary woman physicist. How many feminists does it take to screw in a light bulb? That's not funny. And then we have also a lady perhaps forgotten, who at the time was quite famous. In fact, Lydia Pinkham is her name, and she was published oftener than any other woman in the world, her photograph. And it was basically her photograph that was on the Lydia Pinkham Medicine Company. And here's a letter from the Pinkham Advertising Company. But apparently she appeared, her photograph was the first to be used in advertising, strange as it seems. It was worth every penny of the $40 million subsequently spent on keeping her image in the public eye. The most published woman figure, Lydia Pinkham. And here we have Helen Douglas Mencken of Atlanta, Georgia, moving into the world of sports. She was a baseball enthusiast and was the only woman to whom the Southern League had ever given a gold lifetime pass. And here at the time, 1949, she was a scout for the Atlanta Crackers. And I wore my Atlanta Black Crackers, which is the the professional Negro League team from the same era. In fact, I think they both played on the Ponce de Leon Park field. Both teams did during this era. But really amazing. Here's a letter, a handwritten or a hand-signed letter from Helen Douglas Mencken. I am the only woman to whom the Southern League has ever given a gold lifetime pass. They've given very few to men even. In the off time, I scout for the Atlanta Crackers and am a member of the National Association of Professional Baseball Scouts. And so far as I know, I'm the only woman scout in the country. Helen Douglas Mencken from Atlanta, Georgia. And the final story from these extraordinary women, and I asked this question at the top of the episode, and I'm sure raised a few eyebrows when I said, who's the female pitcher who struck out Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig in the same game? And that would be Jackie Mitchell. She was the first woman baseball pitcher engaged by an organized baseball team, and it was the Chattanooga Lookouts. And I even have a letter here from the Lookouts on Chattanooga Lookout letterhead. And yeah, it was an exhibition game. And she struck out Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and Tony Lazzeri in order. Amazing story, and several letters here from Jackie Mitchell, even a handwritten letter from Jackie Mitchell to my grandma, Elsie. But an extraordinary pitcher from the early days of baseball, a female baseball player, Jackie Mitchell from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Well, that wraps it for this second episode on women from the Women Miscellaneous folder of the Strange As It Seems archives. If you like content like this about the strange and unusual, facts about science, nature, and of course extraordinary and forgotten people throughout history, click the bell to subscribe, like, follow, leave me a comment, and stay tuned for another episode next week with another folder from the archives here at Strange As It Seems.